On this episode of the Armchair Coaching Podcast, we are talking Auburn Tigers football. But first, before we get started, if you are viewing this on YouTube and you're one of the people who watches for about 20 seconds and clicks off to another video, please do us a huge favor here at the podcast. Please subscribe and like this video down below. It will help us spread out, get out there. And if you like this content, leave a comment. Just please help us out. If you want to listen to the rest of this episode, the best way to do that, look down below in the information, and you'll find the URL to the Spotify. We're on Spotify now, the Anchor app, and I can't remember the other platform, but we're on there. So check that out. And I'd like to introduce you guys here. Welcome back. Everybody here was here last time. First up for introductions, Coach Bandstra.
Coach, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nick Bandstra. I am currently the special teams coordinator and wide receiver coach at Fairborn High School in Fairborn, Ohio, just outside Dayton. I'm entering my 10th year of coaching. I also run a YouTube site. You can either find it by pulling up Coach Bandstra or Nicholas Bandstra. I got over 230 coaching clinics from coaches around the country on there. But I appreciate Coach for having me back on for a third time. It's always fun talking ball with these group of coaches.
And I'll go ahead and I will put Coach Bandstra's YouTube in the description below. All right, and next up is Coach Bennett.
Hey, Coach. Mathew Bennett, co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at Clinton High School in Clinton, South Carolina. Go Red Devils. I don't have a YouTube or a podcast or anything like that, but if you ever want to talk some football, you can follow me on Twitter at Coach Bennett32. And special shout out to former player Michael Bollinger for getting put on scholarship today at Liberty University up there in beautiful Virginia. That's all I got.
Congratulations. All right. We are missing Coach Bronkhorst tonight. He may or may not pop in at any time. We'll see. So if he does pop in, we might stop and have him introduce himself. Up next, I'm going to have Coach Wilson. Please introduce yourself.
Hey, guys. Coach Adam Wilson, coach at South Cobb High School in Alstoke, Georgia, the tight ends and special teams coordinator.
All right. Thank you, Coach Wilson. And Coach Whitlock, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, Corky Whitlock, currently not coaching. Huge Clemson fan, huge college football fan. If you ever want to talk either one of those, I'm on Twitter at Corky Whitlock.
All right, thank you very much. And last but not least, Coach Steve.
Yeah, I'm Coach Steve. I'm the offensive line coach and run game coordinator at Addison Trail High School in Illinois, western suburb of Chicago. I was here last time for a little bit, then had to pop off. I appreciate being on here. It's always a good time. I am on Twitter with Coach_Steve72. I run my own little newbie podcast with Anchor, and it's on Spotify. It's a Sideline podcast with Coach Steve. It's the same thing for Twitter. It's Sideline_pod. And it's a YouTube channel trying to do that too with Sideline podcast with Coach Steve. And I'm looking forward to talking some Auburn football.
All right. Thank you very much. And I will also go ahead. I'll put your YouTube information in the description and this, the video below. So I am Coach Sheffer. I am the offensive line coach at Brentsville District High School in Nokesville, Virginia, here in Northern Virginia, not too far away from DC. I'm excited to talk Auburn football. This was, in all honesty, I think Auburn was the team that kind of got me interested in talking this podcast in the first place. We run at my high school, we run a similar offense to what Auburn does, a lot of power spread, a lot of the similar concepts. And so this was our head coach and I, we kind of have this deal that if we ever had the opportunity to go visit Auburn together, we would drop everything and do it. It's one of our dream locations to go visit. So before we get started, we didn't do this last time, but I'd like to do it again tonight. A little bit of news from around the college football world, since we are talking college football today. And the biggest news story that we kind of talked about this right before we started recording the podcast is that the NCAA has voted to give an extra year of eligibility to Division I fall athletes because of this whole COVID-19 situation. Coach Whitlock, you kind of mentioned what this meant. Would you like to talk about that again real quick?
Yeah, I just thought it was, extremely interesting and how it's all going to play out with, this group of whatever class getting an extra year. And then what does that mean to the overall 85 scholarship limit? From what I've read, whether it's true or not, is that they'll get those extra scholarships next year for only 1 year. So, roster management going forward is going to be quite a challenge, I would imagine. This year, folks may be a little hesitant in finalizing their class, kind of trying to figure that out. And even next year might be even more challenging. So I'm curious to see how it all plays out, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm pretty interested in seeing how that plays out as well. Anybody else have any comments on that news story?
I mean, the only other thing I'd say, kind of to his point about roster management, the other thing is you look at your budgets because, to say you have 10 extra players, you're talking possibly just scholarship wise, $200,000, and this is real low end. Say your school's $20,000 tuition, you're talking $200,000 plus feeding 10 extra people, plus traveling 10 extra people. Like from a financial standpoint, some of these like smaller schools, like because last I checked, I think the Con USA is still playing this fall. So, a school like that's going to hurt some financial budgets right there.
Anybody else?
And then are you going to see kids not get recruited, maybe go to a junior college? Are you going to see junior colleges start to shoot up this year if that money is going to be a problem with universities? And because you're seeing universities cut sports already. They're getting rid of some sports because they can't afford it right now. So they're going to go to junior college or, 1AA for a year. So you might see some good players do that.
I think what Coach Steve said there is a big thing. I think the JUCO guys who have relationships, long-standing relationships with the D1 guys, Power 5 guys, you might see Power 5s with a little bit less budget take a kid and say, hey, look, you're going to go and play for my buddy here in Nevada for a year, and then you're going to come over because we'll have you a spot. And some guys do that already for academic reasons, but you might see it with kids with a 4.0 this year, which will really it'll increase the competition at the JUCO level as well.
Too bad they're stopped filming Last Chance U, because this would be an interesting couple years to say the least.
But think about the tough conversations they're going to have to be had too, right? You got a guy who's been in your program 4 or 5 years, and you may have to tell him, you graduated now. I can't keep you. I gotta. I don't have a spot for you anymore, right? And kind of have to push them out. Those conversations will probably happen, big boy football more often than we would think, so.
Well, that's kind of like the last couple of years you've seen a rise in the graduate transfers, right? And so that's probably you're going to see a bump into that maybe, some of those fifth-year seniors who were hoping to get a shot at starting this year, maybe not because they got that superstar freshman that came in. And so, hey, I'm going to go from Wisconsin and I might go down to, I don't know, play in Akron or somewhere else. I don't know who wants to go play at Akron right now. But
oh no, we went and saw them live last year as a coaching staff to play Miami.
Yeah.
It was rough.
Action.
Well, one of those Maction games, Akron had less than 100 people there, and it looked depressing on TV.
I don't know about you guys. I might be that weird guy who, instead of watching Thursday night football, I'd rather watch Tuesday night Maction when there's 10 people in the stands and you got 2 and 8 teams playing each other for last spot in the division. I'd still watch that over an NFL game, to be totally honest.
I race home after practice on Tuesdays to watch Max. Are you kidding me?
They occasionally will get a good game on there. Seriously, especially if you, I don't know if you've seen Buffalo lately.
Mm-hmm.
That coaching staff has that going on, and it's just when they play Miami or Eastern Michigan, who's picked it up, it's got some good stuff from alma mater, Ohio University. But then you get the Akron versus Northern Illinois, and you're just
Hey, Northern Illinois had for a couple of years they were rolling pretty well there, and they were
Sure
one of my favorite teams to watch.
Yeah, but their
They
head
got
coach
clobbered
also
by Florida State.
fake Twitter account this offseason. So, I mean,
All right, let's go ahead and start talking about Auburn. So before we get started, I'm going to list off some stats, kind of like I did for Clemson. We'll talk some winning percentages. We'll talk about conference and national championships. We'll talk a little bit about like offensive stats and stuff like that. So we have head coach Gus Malzahn, got the Gus bus going on. This will be I'm pretty sure it's his 7th year at Auburn. And under his guidance, they have been had 62 wins and 30 losses, which is a .674 winning percentage. Compare that to the Auburn all-time winning percentage, which is .631. So they are a little bit above average with Gus Malzahn. College football playoff appearances, none. Yet. Last national championship was in 2010 with Cam Newton. I bet you guys remember that pretty well, don't you? I honestly was rooting against them, to be totally honest. I was rooting for Oregon. They're one of my backup teams, Oregon is. So, SEC championships, the last couple ones, 2010 under Gene Chizik, when they won the national title with Cam Newton. And then they also won the championship in 2013 under Gus when the quarterback was Nick Marshall. Do you guys remember Nick Marshall? Yep, I remember Nick Marshall. They did compete in 2017 in the SEC championship game. They won their conference, their side of the conference that year, but they were not able to beat Georgia. Then that year they also lost to UCF in their bowl game. So, UCF national championship, right? All right. Let's talk a little bit about offense. All right. We'll talk some points per game, yards per game, rush and pass. In 2017, the team went 10-4. This is when they won the SEC West and lost to UCF in their bowl game. They had 33.9 points per game, 451.6 overall yards per game. Rushing at yards per game, they had 218, and passing yards per game, they had 233. So they were pretty balanced comparatively that year. 2018, 8-5, so not the best season, but still pretty good, thinking they're in the SEC. 42.8 points per game. So they had a better win percentage the year before, but they scored more points in their 8-5 season, probably because they were behind and had to throw it a little bit more. Yards per game, 389.9, so a little bit of a dip in yards per game. Rushing yardage, 167.5, so a dip in rushing yardage. And 222 yards passing per game. So that dip in the rushing probably had a little bit to do with whether or not they won or lost a few of those games. 2019, last year, they were 9-4. They lost to Minnesota, rowed the boat in their bowl game. They had 33.2 yards per game. Points per game. 406 yards per game, 199 rushing yards per game, and 207 passing yards per game. And that was under freshman quarterback Bo Nix. Also, another quick note, last year they were able to beat Oregon in their first game because Oregon chose to run cover 2 for some weird reason and allowed Auburn to throw for a touchdown. All right. So let's go ahead and get started with our discussion. So the first question, everyone's going to answer this question. And Coach Steve, I'm going to give you first shot at this one. Our first question is, It's very similar to our first question last time when we talked about Dabo Sweeney. What are your personal thoughts or impressions on Gus Malzahn?
I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good offensive mind. Because before he even got to Auburn, I had to dig up the book that he made when he was in high school, when he was coming up with the offense. I had to refresh my memory on exactly everything. He was good in high school as a coach. I think he was offensive coordinator when they won the national championship with Cam Newton. So his offensive mind is pretty good. He did good at Tulsa, then to come back. I believe a couple of those years he handed over the play calling duties when their yards went down, and then he tried to take it back over. So I think offensively he's a good mind. You see like Brent Dearman ran his offense over at Kansas. He was with him, so he's doing good with the offense. It's just for some reason there's like some of the big games they step up. They've beaten Alabama a couple of times, the kick around the world or the kick return. They beat Oregon. They've beaten certain big time teams, but then there's times where they play big teams and they don't win all the time. It's inconsistent. And we might get to it later. It's some of their quarterback play is inconsistent. And sometimes I don't know if they have an identity of we're going to run the ball or pass the ball this game. And again, when he takes over play calling, you can tell they want to run the ball. When he hands it over, it's more passing than anything else. But he's a good coach. It's just they got to get over the hump of the big games. And I don't know how you go about that because you recruit different, but you can't take away his offensive mind or anything.
Yeah. All right. Coach Whitlock.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I like him. Going back, I have bought his Hurry Up No Huddle book when I was coaching Little League, and trying to figure out what I could take from that. Using wristbands, trying to go fast, even with 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and it was very successful. And just took the very basics of his concepts, just the power run game, spread them out, did a lot of that with the little guys. And I feel like he's undervalued there, to be honest, right? I mean, they talk about hot seat all the time. He plays in probably the toughest division in college football, the SEC West. He's won a lot of big games. I think if he truly had a dual threat guy that could throw first, but could run, escape, he had that sort of in Newton, sort of in Nick Marshall. I thought, what's his name? Jason, I can't think of his last name now, transfer from Baylor. I thought he might have been the guy, but I don't think he had the wheels to really do what he wants to do from a run game perspective. But overall, he seems like a good guy. Seems like he cares. The program's built the right way from what I can tell. I don't know if he's very personable. I don't know if he's got that it factor when he goes into recruit or not. I don't get that vibe from him. But I think he does a great job of tailoring his player skill set around what they can do. It's a very simple offense from what I can tell, but complexity with the way he moves his alignments, a lot of shifting before, pre-snap, a lot of eye candy kind of move, trying to get the defense not in the right spot. But like you said, very balanced, right? Run game, pass game. But I think he is run heavy, more so than he is, it doesn't seem overly aggressive on the passing game.
Yeah. So we kind of mentioned in the chat, Coach Whitlock, I think you were thinking of Jarrett Stidham.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. The current co-starter with Cam Newton in New England, which I think that's a little bit of smoke going on there. Coach Wilson, you're up.
I think, obviously he's had a lot of success, especially as a coordinator, and then moving on as a head coach. They played in the national championship game. It seems like a big piece is who he has around him, which goes for every coach. But it does seem like he's made some decisions that have not necessarily panned out in terms of who he's picked. We talked about the coordinator issues where he's given up control, taking it back, giving it up, taking it back, and how that's gone. So it's going to be really interesting to see what it's like with Chad Morris this year.
Yeah. I think we kind of mentioned it last night. I can't remember not last night, the other night. I can't remember if it was during the recording or not, where we kind of mentioned that Chad Morris and Gus Malzahn were almost the same guy offensively. So I think they're probably going to be on one mind, and we'll see how that goes. So Coach Bronk's not with us, so I'll take over. So I don't personally know Gus Malzahn. I don't know that many college coaches myself. I'm only 28 years old. Haven't met a whole lot of them yet. So I can only go with what I've seen on TV, which, sometimes you see the actual person, sometimes you don't. But he definitely seems like the kind of guy who you'd almost want to have a beer with, and then as a player, he's definitely kind of like the cool dad type of dude from what I've seen. And I've seen that work, but to me, there's something missing, like there's something missing that keeps them from going over the hump. I don't know what that is. We might be able to discuss that later. There's another question here coming up about that. So Coach Bennett, what are your personal thoughts?
I was fortunate enough to meet him one time. He was the keynote speaker at the coaches clinic down here in South Carolina one summer. And he was really, when he walked in the door, they go and pick the keynote speaker up at the airport. He had his running backs coach with him. The guy's with the Eagles now, coaching receivers. And he had one other coach with him, but he brought him in, and they were trying to, rush Coach Malzahn in. And he stopped at the door. I saw a group of us standing there. There was a legendary head coach here in South Carolina, and I just happened to be standing in that group with him. Well, he stopped and came over and talked to him because he'd been recruiting that guy's kids probably at every stop he's been at. And the guy was down at the beach, so it was a great place to go recruit if you had the chance. And when we were standing there, the thing about him I'll never forget is I stuck my hand out and I shook his hand. And I said, Coach Malzahn, nice to meet you. Mathew, Bennett, Bowling Springs High School. When he shook my hand, he said, Gus Malzahn, Auburn University. And I was like, yep, got that. But it was really nice. Stood there and talked to us, wouldn't let his handlers usher him off. I think I could see how he would come off as a little bit awkward. I think anybody whose intelligence is so high, once it gets to a point, you kind of become awkward a little bit. A former high school head coach here in South Carolina told a story about Coach Malzahn that he was an analyst for him at Auburn. It was Bobby Bentley. And I know a bunch of guys that played for him. And they said Coach Bentley told the story. One of his duties was to draw up every different front a team had showed to each of their formations. And Malzahn's so smart that he came in, looked at them all on the board, and picked one out and was like, I think this guy's in more of a 4 than a 5. Out of all the formations and all the different looks they had, he picked that one out and was like, he was able to pick up on it. So, just super smart, down to earth, started his career on the defensive side of the ball. I enjoyed listening to him speak, but definitely smarter than me.
Probably smarter than all of us, to be totally honest. And Coach Bandstra.
Kind of echo a lot of them said. The national media likes to play it off as he's always trying to play more of a Nick Saban role as managing everybody and let his coordinators do his thing. And if you look at it, it doesn't necessarily always work. That's where will the Chad Morris thing work? Chad Morris has proven offense coordinator has done a really good job. But he's had Rhett Lashley as his OC before, who knew his system because he played in it in high school. Will this work? Are there good staff hires there? Obviously they're all Division I coaches. They're probably good at what they're doing, but are they right fits? We talked a lot about culture last time on and off the screen. When we talked Clemson, do those guys fit that culture and fit what he wants to do? So that's the main thing. He's a great offensive mind, started his career as DC. A lot of people fell in love with him because he ran that shotgun wing tee, that run power, shotgun buck sweep, all that lovely stuff. And if he can get it all put together again, they'll be a force.
Yeah. Anybody else have another comment to add to this question before we move on?
I think the only thing I see difference between him and Morris, which I think will be really interesting this year, is I think Molson favors the run, and I think Morris favors the vertical. I mean, he wants to stretch the field and get it down there. I mean, he wants to put pressure on that back into the defense, and it'll be really interesting to see who's really calling the shots. We'll know early on if they're taking a lot of deep shots and they're being really aggressive, then that's probably Morris. If it's power, take a shot here or there, it might be a little bit more Gus.
All right. Next question. Kind of like I mentioned a moment ago where I said I feel like something might be missing from that program. What or who is holding Auburn back from being an elite program like Alabama or Clemson? And Coach Bandstra, I'm going to give you first shot at this one.
I'm going to kind of go back to what I just said. It's like, who are you hiring? Like, if he truly wants to be the Nick Saban where he manages everything, obviously he still has input in things. Like, you have to hire the right people that fit what you want them to do. If you want to be power spread, you need to hire a really good power spread offense coordinator. You need to hire that defense coordinator that's going to just shut stuff down. Like, that's what Clemson and Alabama done. I mean, we talked last time about Clemson and the Venables hire and how great that was for them. Like, and is Chad Morris going to be that offensive coach who does it for him? Like, no, honestly, like, obviously I don't live in the South, but I can't name another staff member besides Gus Malzahn and Chad Morris off the top of my head. I mean, there's probably somebody else's name on there I know, but I can't name them. I mean, and then the other thing is just get consistency at quarterback. And yes, Kevin, thank you, Coach Bennett in the chat. Kevin Steele, yes, Kevin Steele's really good at what he does. Yeah, I see. But like consistency at quarterback. I mean, they had Cam Newton there once upon a time, and he lit everything up. And then ever since then, it's been, I mean, people but it's not anybody that you're just like, wow. Or they just didn't put together while they were there. Like, it's just not. I mean, they've had good kids there that could play, but I mean, that needs to click. Whether it be the mesh or the just syncing with the receivers or the syncing with the system and adjusting your system to who you got there. Like, I think those are the two biggest things is what do you want to do with your staff? Who are they? And then can you get that quarterback position to be running on all cylinders?
Coach Bennett?
I think honestly what holds them back more than anything, because Kevin Steele's been there for a few years. They just signed him to a 3-year extension. The defense has been good. He's done a better job at Auburn, in my opinion, than he did at Clemson. But he's had some studs now. I mean, some defensive linemen. He's kind of done what Venables has done at Clemson. He's built it from the front back and had some really good defenses. I think the two biggest things holding him back that I wrote in my notes is number one is geography. Big Brother's right down the street. And, you know, Auburn people hate to hear that. But from a national standpoint, since Nick Saban's arrived, the Malzahn Gus has got him a couple times. I think Coach Malzahn and obviously Clemson are probably the two biggest thorns in his side at Alabama. But that's the big thing, because they're locked in a state with Alabama, and now Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin are in Mississippi, and that's I mean they're in, and I hate the SEC crowd, but the SEC West, I mean that's a meat grinder, and they play it every year. When I look at their schedule, I was like, man, they got lucky. They don't have to play Florida. And then I looked at the rest of it, and I was like, well, maybe not. You know what I mean? Because they still got to play the SEC West. The other thing that I wrote down is, to me, they've seemed to, and I spent all day today watching offensive film from them from 2013, which I think is the most pure example of the offense with Nick Marshall and 3 really good backs. And 2019, and last year they weren't a bad football team, but I think they're losing their offensive identity. When you go see Charlie Daniels play in concert, RIP Charlie Daniels can play the fire out of a guitar, but you don't go to see Charlie Daniels play the guitar. You go to see Charlie Daniels play the fiddle. You don't watch Auburn to watch them run inside zone and stretch. You want to see power, counter, and buck. And they're not doing that as much as they did in 2013 when they were really good. I don't think Bo Nix gives them what Nick Marshall gave them. Certainly doesn't give them what Cam Newton gave them when he's the offense coordinator. Nobody will. He was an anomaly. He could have run any offense. But I think they need to get back to their gap scheme stuff and offensive line coaches. They got a new one this year. Jack Brick, what's his name? I wrote it down, but I got bad handwriting. Jack Bicknell, from Ole Miss. And I hadn't watched enough Ole Miss to know. I mean, I'm sure he's a very good coach, but when you're coming off J.B. Grimes was there for a while. He left. Herb Hand came. J.B. Grimes came back. This guy's got a lot to live up to, and I mean, I'm sure he'll do a good job. But if they go back to a more gap scheme type running style, can he coach that up as well as it was coached up by Grimes at Hand? That's just my 2 cents. But I think if you're that good at teaching the gap schemes and as good as scheming it up like Malzahn is, I don't understand why you would be running as much zone as they do.
Yeah, I think I'll take over from Coach Bronk for here. Like you said, I think it's well known within the coaching community how important an offensive line coach is. A good offensive line coach. If you have an elite offensive line coach, your offensive line is going to be good every year, no matter what. I've seen some wishy-washy play on the O-line here and there at Auburn, so that might be a factor. I don't think a lot of people nationally know that about offensive line. They either don't care or they just are ignorant to how important the offensive line really is, especially to these gap scheme teams. If I had to say, obviously, I don't know exactly how they run their program there at Auburn. Kind of like we kind of know how they run the Clemson program down there in Clemson. We know it's got a lot of good culture going on down there, real positive culture. If I had to say anything about Auburn, it's the only thing you ever hear about Auburn is Gus Malzahn's offense. That's all you ever hear. You don't ever hear anything about their culture. You don't ever every once in a while you hear about their defense because they've got a couple good defensive players or a good defensive coach, but you never hear about culture. You don't have that, at least from appearances, you don't have that championship culture that you would in Alabama, that you would at a Clemson, teams like that. So that's what I personally think might be missing. Again, like I said, I don't know. I've never actually met the guy. I've never actually been to a practice. So I'm just talking about what I've seen from the outside in. Anybody else, open discussion time? Anybody else have some comments they'd like to add to this?
I mean, me personally, I think it's quarterback play. I mean, that's what I have in my notes here. I mean, like you guys talked about, I think Matt brought it up about since Nick Marshall, really, they haven't had a true dual threat guy. And if you're going to run it the way Malzahn wants to run it, then, you got to have a quarterback that can move, right? Now with Chad Morris, I think he prefers a guy who can chuck it first and run second. And so this, actually Bo Nix might be a better fit in the Chad Morris version of this offense than the Gus Malzahn. So that could help him, but this schedule is an absolute grinder. I mean, you like he said, Kiffin coming in. I don't know how well he'll do this year, but the air raid, I don't know if they've got the skill there. That's the other thing though, going back to Auburn, is I don't think they've had elite talent at wide receiver like they have at some of the other positions to go along with their quarterback either. They've had a few guys here or there sprinkled in. But yeah, Big Brother Alabama has been loaded there. Here, Clemson, we've been absolutely loaded there the last, few, 5 or 6 years at least. So I think those are the big things that stick out to me. And then this year they lost so much. I mean, I was just going through their roster turnover. They got their top 3 receivers back, but they lost 4 of their 5 O-line guys this year. They're going to have to replace. The defensive line was absolutely elite last year. Three true studs on that D-line that they lost. So replacing that's going to be tough. Linebacker should be awesome. They got, Britt back, and they've got Papo. I don't know if I'm saying his last name right, but both those guys are studs. And then to it, as a return guy and as a, being their slot cover guy / hybrid linebacker, he's a stud as well. But the back end replace everybody else. So, both sides of the ball have some challenges, I think, this year to keep things going in such a tough division.
Yeah, it could be their schedule too, holding them back. They play really, really tough schedule. And then kind of piggybacking a little bit, is it recruiting? Do you lose those recruits to Alabama, Florida, and all of them? Are you losing them, not going to lose them to Lane Kiffin, or are you going to lose it to Clemson? Is he not recruiting the right places? But sometimes, the records they have is still pretty good. It's just the SEC, so they look down upon. You take those records in the Big Ten, where we're in this country, Illinois, we'd love it. We'd love to go, 10-2 or 9-5 or whatever it is. So is it outplayed too much? I'm not sure. And then, you have to make a decision. Are you the head coach and you're the CEO and you're just going to have your input and have other people do the play calling? Or are you going to be the offensive coordinator and say, I'm the offensive coordinator, I'm going to hire guys around me that are going to do the positions? Like a Mike Leach, he's the offensive coordinator. He hires the right people around him. You can't halfway through the season say, I'm going to take over. And then stick to what you know. He went from 4 run plays from wing T type stuff, and then they started to go inside zone stuff, outside zone stuff, getting away from what he was known for. And then he tries to switch it back. Like, it doesn't work. Pick an identity, stick to it. And, so I think it's just a combination. But, they're always right there. They're just a couple plays away from, winning some championships or competing in the SEC championships.
I think also what hurts them is, we go back to that recruiting, every time Arkansas sucks, there's that hanging fruit of, is he going to be back there? There's always that rumor. Football Scoop will start that in October about, is he going back to Arkansas? And we all get it. He coached high school football in Arkansas. It makes sense. He worked at, it just makes sense. But there's always that coverage over it. Is he going to leave? And for some reason, is he going to get fired? Because I can tell you 90% of the programs in this country would be happy to have him as their head coach with his success rate. Obviously there's some exceptions to that, but there's very few SEC teams that complain about going 9-3, 9-4, 10-2, 10-3 every year. There's a handful, but that's going to hurt you recruiting. You hear stories about all the time. It's recruits being told, oh, he's going to leave after this year, or he's going to get fired after this year. That's a factor.
Yeah. I think they would be really dumb to fire him, like you were kind of saying. It's just look at his what do they really care about at Auburn? Do they care about national titles, or do they care about beating Alabama? And who's been better at beating Alabama, except for Clemson, obviously? Who's been better at beating Alabama other than Auburn? Not a whole lot of programs, right? Not a whole lot of coaches. So if besides Dabo Swinney, if there's an Alabama Slayer, it's got to be Gus Malzahn when he's on fire, when things are clicking. Because when things aren't clicking, Alabama's ready to pounce. Coach Wilson, do you have anything to add?
I got a fun.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the thing that gets me about them is it's different stuff every year. It's not a couple consistent issues other than maybe the quarterback play. It's always different stuff every year. So it's not like you can point to one thing and be like, okay, well, they really need to fix this. The other thing that gets me about them is, I don't remember the last time they had an elite receiver.
Sammy Coates.
That was the last one I can remember.
Yeah. So it's been a few years since that.
2013, yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about quarterback play, though. I think it would be awesome to go back and look at how many top-end guys they just missed out on. Because I know Watson was, giving him a little peek before he finally, because he and Cam were tight, and he, Cam enticed him to come down to visit kind of secretively or whatever. Imagine what that offense would have been like with him in it, And then I'm sure every year after that, it seems like they're in on, I hear them recruiting some guys we're recruiting or whatever, and they just miss out. And, there's a few, I'm sure, elite level quarterbacks that we could go back and pick out and say, man, if they would have gotten this guy, it probably would have made a huge difference last year, the year before, guy would have been a junior or whatever instead of, going with the true freshman and a very tough schedule.
Yeah. All right. Before we start talking quarterback, that's actually the next topic. All right. So real quick, I'm going to read you guys, since Cam Newton, the list of starting quarterbacks at Auburn. All right. Cam Newton, 2010. And we obviously know what he did, right? 2011, you had Barrett Trotter and Clint Mosley. 2012, you had Keel Frazier and Jonathan Wallace. 2013 through 2014, you had Nick Marshall. And we know how good Nick Marshall was. 2015, you had Jeremy Johnson for part of the year. And then the rest of the year, and then 2016, you had Sean White. 2017, 2018, you had Jarrett Stidham, who, I mean, he was good enough to get into the NFL, but what did he really do at Auburn? Some. And then last year, you got a starting freshman in Bo Nix. And honestly, he didn't do all that bad. But here's my question. And Coach Whitlock, you kind of talked about it. I'm going to give you first shot at this question. Does Auburn have a quarterback problem?
I mean, I think it's too early to say this year. I mean, what we saw last year was a true freshman going out there and playing a really tough schedule. I think he did show a lot of moxie in a lot of tough games. I mean, he battled to the end, and that's a great thing to see, especially in a freshman, right? I never saw him hang his head or, get down on himself, that kind of thing. He always came back the games I watched. So that to me is, a big plus for them, I think, going into this year. But I was just looking at their depth chart. I don't think I've heard of a single other guy on the roster, which is pretty rare, to not know even their names. So, he's not a big guy either, right? So if he doesn't stay healthy, and again, if you want to run him a lot, you might put yourself in a bad spot. But I do think Morris's offense helps. If they're really going with Morris's offense, I think it fits him better, and I think that could be a better overall fit.
All right. Is Coach Wilson there? I don't see him on there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. You're up.
Yeah, so I mean, the list of names that you just read through, that was a lot of bad and some kind of in the middle, like Stidham, who I kind of agree with you. I'm not really sure he fit the offense, but he's a good player. And then some good. Like, obviously, Nick Marshall was a great fit in that offense. So some really bad. Those were pretty bad, some of the names on there. Like, we're talking probably bottom of the SEC or very close to it the years that they started, some of those guys. And then in terms of what they have now, he was a freshman last year, and I thought I saw some bright spots. So it'll be interesting to see how it looks in year two. Obviously, with Chad Morris coming in, it'll be really important for Chad Morris to help his development.
All right. And Coach Steve.
I think they do. They do, because I feel like they recruit differently. I need to go back and look at the film. We keep talking about them changing play calls or not, and this and that. Are you recruiting one year to say, okay, we need a zone read quarterback that's going to do this or that? And then once you get into it, oh, they can't run, we need to start doing this or going back to this. So are you putting those quarterbacks in a bad situation to begin with? Or are you just not – are you not changing it to what they can do, but you're trying to force them to do something else? It goes back to who's play calling, what kind of offense you're going to run. But I do think there is somewhat of a quarterback problem. But you've seen quarterbacks on other teams that have won championships or competed, and those teams kind of go, okay, he can't do this, we're going to do this instead. And they put them in a better situation to be good instead of forcing them to try to do something they can't do. Again, I have to find the film and really watch, but from what we're talking about, that could be a situation where Gus needs to make a decision on how they recruit, who's going to do what, and how do they put that kid in a situation to, get them to win ball games.
Okay. All right. Open discussion time. Anybody have any extra comments to add on to that or a response to somebody else's comment?
My question is, why weren't those quarterbacks successful? Is it they weren't right for their scheme, or were they just bad? Because, like, I just looked at it while you guys were talking. Like, Jeremy Johnson and Sean White were both 4-star quarterbacks coming out of high school. Like, they both played in All-American games. Like, I mean, and it's not like
bad evaluations.
Yeah, I think
they're just missed evaluations on those
yeah,
guys.
I think they're fallbacks. I think you miss on your 5-star, 4-star guy that you really want, that really fits, and you miss out. He goes somewhere else, and you go after the White, because White and Watson were probably right around the same time. There's probably a few others there. If you went back and look who was really at the top of their board, they missed that guy. Same at wide receiver. Half of those guys at Bama were top of their board. Same at Clemson. We battled for the same guys almost every year, and they just missed out.
I think a lot of it comes down to what Coach Steve said. And it's going to be even more interesting this year because of all the new recruiting stuff going on with the COVID stuff. Like I said earlier, the most, and I don't remember if it was forced, I think it was earlier while we were recording, the most pure version of the offense that I've seen, 2010, they had everything in one player with Cam Newton. And they had some good players with him, but in 2013, they had everything you needed for his system. Nick Marshall, who could throw the deep ball and screen game and some quick game, but he wasn't hitting a lot of intermediate reads. He was play action fake, throw it as far as you can. They had Sammy Coates, who could flat go get it. I think he's one of the best receivers in the SEC at the time. And then in the backfield, you take your pick, Trey Carson, Artis Payne, Cameron Artis Payne, or Corey Grant. 3 solid backs, all of which who started at one point or another. Trey Carson, the SEC championship game against Missouri that year, toted the ball something like 40 times, broke the single game rushing record. I mean, and that film's brutal. I mean, that's a snuff film. They beat Missouri to death up front, and Trey Carson's just carrying people. They don't have that, and but they've got Bo Nix, who I think Chad Morris is going to get a lot out of. Like Coach Whitlock said earlier, Deshaun Watson would have been great in that system, but Chad Morris knows how to adapt it as well, because he had Taj Boyd, who would have been great at Auburn, running their stuff, all their quarterback run stuff. And Chad Morris used a lot of that. But now he's got a kid like Bo Nix, who's better than anything he had at Arkansas. And I think he'll help the passing game. And, I mean, even when Chad Morris was at Clemson, he run Coach Malzahn's offense. But, I mean, he didn't run a lot of – we weren't a big zone team. We were still running a lot of gap scheme stuff then. Mm-hmm. So maybe he'll get it back. And if he gets it back and fixes the passing game, you could see a big year from Bo Nix. Because I certainly think Chad Morris will coach him up.
Yeah, I don't know if they have a quarterback problem because, like you guys said, they're still getting 4-star guys. You know, maybe some of them are busts, right? And like one of you guys said, maybe their skill set doesn't necessarily fit their system, and the system might not be as flexible as some other systems. He's very like, I'm going to run this no matter what. And so if you can't be flexible, you're not going to get as much out of the guys as you want. And I think Nick Marshall was also a very good runner too, which definitely scared a lot of defenses and probably opened up a lot of things for 3 really good running backs, like you mentioned. I mean, if you get 3 running backs like that, even though, you know, there's a lot to be said, they didn't necessarily do much at the NFL, but, you know, not a whole lot of people do. You get a lot of guys like that, and you use them that way, it's pretty deadly. So the next question, because we're talking about offense anyways, and I think I'll answer this one first, is the number one thing you hear out of Auburn and the number one like intricate thing you hear that everyone's interested in, everyone wants to know about Auburn's offense, right? That's like everyone wants to run Auburn's offense. Everybody wants to run the up tempo, no huddle. Everybody wants to do sugar huddles. Everybody wants to do the different shifts and all that kind of stuff. So what is it about the Auburn / the Gus Malzahn offense that high school coaches love? Now, I know he has, when he was in high school, he was a high school coach. He was basically running a shotgun wing tee. They still run a lot of buck sweep. They run a lot of the gap schemes. They use a lot of the kind of like the wing tee philosophies. I really like personally the fact that when they're clicking, they're running maybe 3 run plays and a couple good pass plays. Like they're keeping it simple, but they make it look complicated to the defense from the different formation, the shifts, the sugar huddles, the different tempos that they use. So it's actually a simple offense. And whether or not you agree that it is a shotgun wing tee, because some people don't. I know a couple people on Twitter who talk about how they run the Auburn offense, but it's not shotgun wing tee. But then you get wing tee coaches who are like, I watch Auburn because they're wing tee. Whether or not you agree with that or not, there's different things about it. But my personal theory is that everybody loves the shifts, the motions, the different tempos. They make it look sexy, right? You can run a jet sweep across and run buck sweep the other way. You can run different zone reads and all that kind of stuff, and it's the same play. It's just different little tags that are pretty easy to run to use. And in my opinion, that's probably the best thing you can do for high school. If you can make your offense look complicated to a defense, that in high school you got 16, 17-year-old kids on the field playing defense, and who knows, maybe their girlfriend just dumped them, or they're still thinking about some girl they want to hook up with, or, you know, like they're not thinking about football all the time. They're confused. Maybe that one motion makes them run the other way when they're supposed to run that way, you know, and that type of offense really works well. And I can say that from experience because we run a very similar offense at our high school. It's not exactly the same, but we definitely run buck sweep from the gun. We run a play that looks like a trap from the gun. We run jet sweep runway, run the other way. We run some of the same screens and the different motions and stuff like that, and it works. Especially because our quarterback is a all-district player who ran more than he threw for. So that's one thing that I think a lot of high school coaches look for. Next person up, Coach Steve. I'm going to give you the next go-round.
I think high school coaches like it because, you know, we keep talking about that 2013 team when he took over as the head coach. It's actually really simple when you get right down to it. You know, he took the wing tee blocking philosophies. When you read that book from his high school days, it made it so simple. And then if people don't know Coach Darrin, he's at Kansas now. He was an offensive assistant there in 2013. And if people don't have the book, his evolution of the RPO, he goes into saying we only had 4 run plays, you know, and it was, you know, like power, buck sweep, trap, and stuff like they only really worked on a handful of plays and they could disguise it. So I think high school, they like it because you're getting those guys saying, well, I can go spread to run the ball instead of spreading to pass the ball. And when you really get down to looking at Darrin's offense at Kansas, he did a couple of Zoom things this summer. It's so simple, and he keeps it as simple as he can. Get that book. It's so simple, and the RPO is off of it, you know, honest. And so I think that's why high school coaches love it, but they do need to accept the fact that the buck sweeps and stuff, if you want to run, though, you're going to go talk to a wing T team and say, how do you block this? All you're going to do is run it from a pistol or a shotgun, and it's going to work just as well. And then, you know, it is sexy because you see kids on Saturdays like, I want to go be a spread offense. Well, you can convince them we're spread, we're running the ball, but we're spread, and you get them to buy into that. I think they'll buy into it. So I think high school coaches love it because it's simple at its core. So you keep it simple, and those kids buy in. It's going to be really good at the high school level.
Okay. And Coach Bandstra.
I mean, you guys have kind of hit it on the head already. I mean, high school coaches love Auburn because they were the first ones to make shotgun wing tee sexy. I mean, every high school coach knows when they get hired, like, oh, wing tee works, okay? But a lot of them know they can't really necessarily sell under center wing tee to their community. So what do? You put in the shotgun and you run it, and it works. Like, I mean, Coach Simpson has made a nice living and come on my YouTube channel and talk about the shotgun wing T, which he runs all the time. Like it's like people love shotgun buck sweep. It's a great play. You can RPO off it. It's great. Like you add shifts, trades, it makes it difficult for defenses. And like I said, you can make it as easy or complicated as you want. But I mean, in the end, like I mean, it got sold very well and hit at the right time. I mean, like a lot of those offenses do, they get popular. Like it hit the right time. They won. It looked really good. And people, I mean, you almost can't go a day by where there's like not some sort of Auburn shotgun wing T sort of play on Twitter or Facebook at this point in one of those groups. It just shows up everywhere because people that get one intro of the shotgun wing T, that's the first clips they show is here's Auburn running it.
All right. Anyone else have a comment to add?
I wrote down on my notes for this one. I think one of the reasons it's so popular amongst high school coaches, and they've already hit on it a little bit, is the run game is, I mean, it's old school wing T rule-based blocking. And especially if you're a younger offensive coach and you can go to your head coach who's 65, who's been doing it for a long time, and he's seen everything and done everything, and you can say, look, coach, we can spread it out, but we can still run buck, we can still run trap, we can still run power, still run counter. We don't have to change our rules. You know, rule-based run blocking helps a lot. And not many, you know, other than Coach Sheffer, not many of us are blessed with an all-state, all-district quarterback, and you don't need one for this offense. You can run this offense with a quarterback who can throw a hitch, a slant, and throw it as far as he can on a play-action pass, as long as he can run the football. Mm-hmm. So I think between not needing a dominant quarterback and making the game fairly simple for the offensive line to where they can play fast and not think, as a guy who coaches in a gap scheme run offense, I tell my guys all the time, it don't matter what front they line up in, follow your rules, you'll be all right. That's I think that's what makes it an easier sell to some of these guys out here, head coaches who've been in the game a while, a little long in the tooth.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that too, I think from purely an Auburn perspective, they do make it sexy, right? I mean, you and not only just from a shift movement, during play, pre-play, whatever, but that slight advantage it may give you, right? You either mess up somebody's keys on where am I going here, or just that slight advantage of an extra hat, right, in a place where you weren't expecting it, right? And if you can get that at the high school level, right, because, I mean, normally it's going to be, good on good, right, unless you've got somebody who's, 4-star, 5-star playing against your 2-star who's going to, you double team him and he's still going to blow you up, right? I mean, to get that extra hat out in an open space, that's huge, right? And I think that's what is appealing, right, is that, okay, well, I can run these same basic things, but I can now maybe confuse somebody just enough or slow them down just enough where I get that extra step on them and I can get to the edge or whatever. I think that's what makes it, even at the little league level, it was fun to do it because of that kind of stuff.
Coach Wilson, do you have anything to add?
No, I was just going to say, I thought you guys really hit it on the head. And I would say, too, what I enjoy about watching their offense, because I love it, I watch it all the time, is that blend of gap scheme and the inside zone and some of the things that they're doing with the quarterback in the zone running game. And then also the way they use the H-back, too. Mm-hmm. Like, we'll get to it in a minute when we talk about favorite players. But watching Jay Prosh in that offense, he's just like a kick-ass H-back. So I use their film all the time, just as teach tape.
Yeah. You guys, Coach Bandstra, you mentioned Coach Simpson, and he's come out recently with a lot of stuff on CoachTube about his gun tee offense. I tried to get him on tonight, but he was busy. I think he was moving in to his new house tonight, unfortunately. Hopefully we can get him in for another talk, because he is a very knowledgeable coach on shotgun wing tee, and he is kind of the guy if I became an offensive coordinator tomorrow, I'm probably running the offense that he was running because I love Buck Sweep, and his offense is all about getting the most bang for your buck, right? It is shotgun, right? It is an Auburn style offense, but it's also the wing T. But when you are able, like I'm a true believer in the under center old school wing T. I'm a true believer that you are going to win games running that no matter your personnel if you're a good coach. When you're able to back it up into a shotgun and add the RPO, that's when you start scaring defensive coordinators. My favorite play from Coach Simpson's stuff, I don't know if I'm giving too much away, is this very simple RPO. It's a buck sweep RPO, and he basically tells he's got twins to one side and then the tight end and the wing to the other side. They run the buck sweep to the tight end wing like buck sweep is usually run, and it's all he tells that inside receiver on the opposite side is just run inside and beat your guy, right? And it's a simple read for the quarterback. He looks, because they've run buck sweep 10 times in a row, he's looking to see if that inside linebacker is swinging with the buck sweep or not. And if he does, it's a simple just pull, toss it up, and that wide receiver is going to be open. And I've seen multiple clips of that play in particular go for touchdowns. It's scary. You know, RPOs, I was a defensive coach for a couple of years, this past couple of years. RPOs are basically undefendable. Basically. Unless you can go, you know, man-to-man cover zero and you have the dudes to do it, RPOs are basically undefendable. So that kind of scares me as well. That to me is a very sexy offense there. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the next question here. And you kind of mentioned it. I'm going to give Coach Bennett first shot at this one. Who has been your favorite Auburn player, or are there any special moments that stick in your mind when you think Auburn football?
Favorite player is easy. It's Trey Carson. I've always really liked a running back that's not scared to tote the mail. And I mean, just that game against Missouri is enough to make you fall in love with a guy like that. The way he ran the ball, but he was always very physical, ran behind his pass, never scared to stick it up in there, and also was really good at getting that cut back on power. As far as favorite moment goes, not being an Auburn fan, the first game they played after they won the national championship was at Clemson in Death Valley, and we beat them. It was the Sammy Watkins coming out party. I was at that game. That was a great one. And I was at the Clemson Carolina game when the kick six happened, about to go in the stadium, watching Nick Saban raise hell to get that timeout, to get that 1 second put back on the clock. And that was one of the most breathtaking moments like ever. So, I mean, those stick out in my mind. Auburn fans are super nice. I talked about this the other night. I went to Auburn, watched them play LSU at home at Jordan-Hare Stadium at night, primetime ESPN game, and they wore them out. That was Nick Marshall last year, 2014, and they just hammered them, and that was fun. Jordan-Hare's a great place. I got to see him roll the trees and all that. If you ever get a chance to go to Auburn for a game, highly advise it. Highly advise it.
Okay. Coach Wilson?
I kind of already gave my one away in Jay Prosh. Great H-back for them. I loved watching him play. He was a great blocker, great pass catcher. And then, two, I would say Cam, just because he was a complete freak of nature. I mean, truly a freak of nature for them. So he was fun to watch, too. And then special moments. I did go to Auburn. I went to their spring game. That was fun. It's a nice community over there, like Coach Bennett was talking about. And then obviously the kick six. That was take your breath away. That was huge.
All right. Favorite player. You see, my thing is, like, I'm going to have to say Cam Newton because I'm not a huge Auburn team fan. I'm a Gus Malzahn offense fan. Like, Auburn's one of those teams that I'll watch whenever they're on TV. But I don't watch them enough to, like, get to know the players all that well. And I have to say the kick six. I mean, that's the number one thing that comes to mind when you think Auburn football. I remember where I was when the kick six happened. I was at work as a college student, and I was making pizza because I was working at a little mom and pop pizza shop in my local town. And out of the corner of my eye, I was like, what's going on? And I look up and I see it, and I was like, oh my God, shit's going down. You excuse my language, but that was what was going through my head. So Coach Steve, favorite player and any special memories?
You gotta go Bo Jackson all the way back when. But I also like Nick Marshall too. When he was playing, I'm not a huge Cam Newton fan. I don't know why. Something about Cam that I just don't trust. He's a good player, but there's just something about him. Not a bad player, but I like Nick Marshall too. I thought he was the perfect quarterback for the system. And then I do have to say that kick six, even though it broke my heart being a Nick Saban fan, that really hurt the soul. But you do have to think of that moment. It was good for them in that program and showed that they were there to play and they could compete. But, it did hurt the soul a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, and Coach Whitlock.
Yeah, I mean, I think you all touched on all of them. The only one that sticks out in my mind in the last 10 years was the Cam Buck, right? The Cam comeback basically against Alabama. They were down 24-0, I think, at halftime, and came back. I think he threw 3 touchdowns, rushed for 1, and they ended up winning that game. And that's what pretty much sent them to the national championship, right? If they lose that game, they might not go. That one sticks out to me. But as far as players go, I mean, it's so tough. I mean, like, you go Nick Marshall, Cam Newton. I liked Kerryon Johnson. I mean, you could go back to like Cadillac Williams, all those guys from back in the day. That's beyond 10 years. But and even on the D line, I mean, D Ford, Nick Fairley, Derek Brown. I mean, they've just had a bunch of studs on the D line that were fun to watch. You always knew they were going to give you a hard time, and we had some tough games with them. I mean, we should have beaten them the year they won the national championship. I mean, that one came down to the wire. I can't remember exactly what the final was, but I mean, even that year, what they win, like most of those games by like a point. I mean, every game was like a miracle. Like, how'd they win that? Just made for a crazy season and a fun win there. But yeah, I think I'd have to go with probably Cam Newton if I had to pick one, just because of all the miraculous things he did that one season.
Okay, and Coach Bandstra.
I mean, he kind of just touched on mine. And my favorite player kind of going together is I remember because I don't even know how old I was. It's probably like 13, 14. I remember Cadillac Williams and Ronnie Brown both getting drafted the top 5 picks in the first round. Like Ronnie go 2 to the Dolphins and then Cadillac go 5 to the Bucks. And it was like, oh, that's very impressive.
What's even crazier about that is Jacobs, that played for the Giants, was on that same backfield and transferred.
Oh yeah, and then they also had who was it? Carlos Rogers went 9th or something like that to the Redskins. Like, I mean, they had a low team talent-wise that year, but like ignoring Cam Newton, like when I think Auburn, honestly, first thing that comes to my head is Cadillac Williams. I don't know if it's because I like his nickname or what, but that's the first person that comes to my mind.
No, an underrated, very underrated Auburn moment is obviously Auburn comes back and beats Alabama that year. Cam's quarterback, they're up 24-0. But in pregame, when Cam walked out, Alabama played "Take the Money and Run" by the Steve Miller Band when Cam walked on the field. That That is some high-level trolling, the likes of which we need more of in college football.
Oh boy, have you guys ever seen the documentary about the Auburn-Alabama rivalry? I can't remember the name of it.
That's a great one.
But the
I know
one
what
where they interview the guy and he's like talking about how he named all his kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, that's good. That's the guy trying to put trees, right?
He killed that. He killed a tree. He just
Yeah,
died.
yeah,
He just passed away. Yeah, I saw
Oh, I
that in the news. The minute I saw that in the news, I thought about him on that documentary. Kept calling Cam Newton Scam Newton. So
Yeah.
that rivalry is for real. Like I was so impressed with that 30 for 30 that I forced my wife to watch that one. I forced her to sit down and watch it because I was like, you have to watch this. You know, it was almost, well, I watched a couple episodes of The Tiger King before I made my wife watch that. It's almost the same kind of thing. Like, you're not going to believe the stuff that's going on. Before we get into all that, let's go ahead to the next question. Coach Whitlock, I'm going to give you the first shot at this one. I'm gonna ask the question, and then I'm going to list their schedule because it has to do with their schedule for 2020. It says, looking at the schedule, what games are you most looking forward to see and why? So here is their schedule for 2020. At home versus Kentucky. Away at Georgia. At home versus Arkansas. Away at South Carolina. Away at Ole Miss. At home versus LSU. Away at Mississippi State. At home versus Tennessee. Away at Alabama. And then at home versus Texas A&M. Talk about a brutal schedule. But what games are you most interested in seeing and why?
I mean, I think the whole schedule looks great. I think there's really only one game that I think they just show up and win probably. That's Arkansas. You know, I don't really know how improved Ole Miss and Mississippi State will be, but with new coaches, you just don't know. You know, preparing for them could be difficult. I mean, they're more in the middle of the schedule. But always the Alabama game, I think, is the one I'm always most interested to watch. I think Georgia will be fun. You know, I think Georgia wins that game, but I think it'll, you know, all those games will be great games, but those are the two that I'm sure will be primetime games and, you know, I want to watch.
Okay. Coach Bandstra?
Like looking at it, like obviously like Georgia and Alabama, those games will suck. I mean, for them. I mean, that's just, I mean, they need to play really well to win those games. They have a chance of winning those games. The Ole Miss, as he kind of said, Ole Miss and Mississippi State can be interesting. I mean, I know Lane Kiffin has his people that like him and people that hate him. I mean, there's no kind of in between with him. But like, I mean, the man can coach football. I mean, and he hired a good staff, and Mike Leach as well. Mike Leach, he will throw the ball 75 times, and he'll find a way to score as many points as humanly possible. I mean, the interesting stuff will be like the Kentuckies. Like, Kentucky isn't no slouch anymore. Like, do you win that game? Like, they are vastly improved. I mean, obviously Arkansas should be a win. Did you say Tennessee was on there too?
Yep.
I mean, in theory, that should be a win as well. I mean, the one it comes down to like how they do against Kentucky, Ole Miss, and Mississippi State. I mean, those like if you can win those three, I mean, then you can talk about playing with Alabama, and then how do you start off the season with Georgia? But in the end, like, I mean, anybody that's an Auburn or Alabama fan, I mean, I got an Alabama alumni in our high school that works in our library, and she is very proponent of her dislike for Auburn. But yeah, I mean, that's the game. But I like, to me, I go back to that. How are you going to handle Kentucky? Because if that's close, we're going to have some problems.
Wasn't Texas A&M on the schedule as well?
Yeah, their last game.
Yeah, I mean, that's another one that, I mean, talent-wise, you know, that's going to be –
Yeah.
They're going to have a tough road because losing their entire D-line pretty much and their entire back, you know, not back seven, but back four, I guess. the Mike Leach could give them some fits, right? If you can't get to the quarterback and you don't have anybody who can cover, he's going to make you pay somewhere, that kind of stuff. So.
All right. Coach Steve?
Yeah, I mean, everyone looks at the Alabama game, and they're going to be either ready to go or beat up by that time. I do have to look at Mississippi State because when Mike Leach was at Washington State in 2013, they only lost to Auburn, 31-24 or something, or 26. And Washington State was up in that game. I know it was Mike Leach's second year there, I think, Gus Malzahn's first year. So that air raid gave him some problems. So, by that time, Mississippi State's played a few games. Auburn's played a few games. People can talk about the air raid. The air raid and wing T, it's that if-then. Air raid's actually pretty simple. So, I mean, if they get it rolling and get bought in, that could be a little interesting. And then I do think people might be overlooking Tennessee a little bit. I'm not saying it'll be good, but by that time, that could be your trap game. Like, who knows what they're going to bring, but that could be another interesting one by that time. But they have a tough schedule, and we'll see what they're made of.
Yeah, I think Auburn's probably sitting there thinking, without having to play people in our conference, why are we the only ones who don't have to play Vanderbilt? Like Georgia, obviously Auburn-Georgia games are usually pretty darn good. I'm kind of interested in seeing at South Carolina, because South Carolina usually plays pretty tough at home, pretty close, and the type of offense they run, they kind of slow it down a little bit, so might be a little bit of a closer. Obviously, the Bama, Mississippi State. I'm looking at that Texas A&M game. I mean, Texas A&M, they got the talent. They usually play everybody pretty close. And what was it? The game of the year a couple years ago, Texas A&M and LSU. How many overtime? I watched that whole game.
Yeah.
I started watching with like a couple seconds left in the fourth quarter, and I watched all of the overtimes from that game. What was it, 7 overtimes? I can't remember how many. Texas A&M, they're always a tough one, so I think that one's going to be a good one. Coach Wilson?
The two that stick out for me, obviously the Georgia game, being a Georgia fan, and plus it's week 2, so we're going to find out, if both programs can compete this year. And then I would say the LSU game too, because I'm also an LSU fan, because my wife's family is from Louisiana. And I think that'll be a good measuring stick game for both programs as well, just because, we'll see 2 top teams in the West and watch them compete against each other and find out, which one is going to be compete for the number 1 spot with Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and Coach Bennett.
The ones that when I look at their schedule, the ones that stood out to me, I don't think I think Kentucky will play them close, but I think eventually talent wins out in the end, and they'll win that one. Then October 3rd, at Georgia, that's one of those games that I could see Georgia absolutely something to prove, thumping Auburn. But I also watched Georgia lose South Carolina last year at home between the hedges. So I don't know. I'd probably take Malzahn if it comes down to that. 31st they go to LSU, but jury's out on LSU because similar to what Auburn had to do with Cam Newton, they're having to replace a generational type talent, which they can do. LSU's got everything you need to win there. I'm obviously very interested to see Mississippi State just because I like Mike Leach. I bought a Mississippi State shirt the day he got the job. And then the Iron Bowl, I think the Iron Bowl comes down to what it always comes down to. How hot is Malzahn's seat and where's Coach Saban at? Because nobody seems to get under Coach Saban's skin more than Gus Malzahn. Just like last year with the 12 men on the field deal, lining his punter up at receiver, to get them to have 12 on the field, automatic first down. Those are tough games, but I could see them winning every one of them. I could see them losing every one of them. It
Mhm.
all depends on the offense and what Coach Steele can do with the new faces on defense. And, the Chad Morris, Malzahn factor, I mean, they've been friends forever. Does that friendship get Chad Morris more leeway than a kid who played for him in Rhett Lashley? It's an interesting dynamic. I can't wait to watch. I can't wait to see how their season unfolds.
Yeah. I think the SEC overall is probably the most interesting because they're playing within themselves, right? They're not playing anybody else. But, there is an argument to make. They are the best conference in the country. You might argue, ACC has a shot because of Clemson, but Clemson's really the only team. Big Ten's pretty good, but they seem to choke in bowl season, unfortunately, except for Minnesota last year. So who knows? Last question. We've got I'm going to have to read the schedule again because it is another schedule question. And Coach Wilson, you're going to be up first. What do you think Auburn's ceiling is, and what do you think their floor is based on their schedule? So ceiling, how many games do you think they could possibly win? And then floor, how many games could they lose at the same time? So, again, here's their schedule. Kentucky at home, at Georgia, Arkansas at home, at South Carolina, at Mississippi, Ole Miss, LSU at home, at Mississippi State, Tennessee at home, at Alabama, and then Texas A&M at home.
Well, just going off that list, I have 3 automatic wins, 3 automatic losses, and then 5 question marks. Like, those are that's part of the problem about playing the SEC. I mean, it's going to be tough, but when you're talking, like I said, Kentucky, they'll probably win that game, but I can see them losing that. They're going to lose to Georgia. They're going to lose to Alabama, in my opinion, based off where they're at right now, especially with year one of wherever Chad Morris is trying to interject into it. It's probably going to be some sort of cross between him and Gus. I mean, the Mississippi and Ole Miss games are games they probably should win this year because they're first-year head coaches and they don't got everything in line, no spring ball, but you never know. You should be Tennessee. A&M, I think, could be a tough game if Jimbo keeps building, and it's not like end of Florida State Jimbo. It's early Florida State Jimbo. I mean, it's stuff like that. They could be 500 or they could be going in with 2 or 3 losses at the end of the year. I mean, I don't foresee them beating Alabama or Georgia. I just don't.
All right. Coach Wilson?
I would say probably somewhere between maybe 5-5 and 7-3. So, like we talked about, the SEC is always crazy, and then this year in particular is going to be nuts with all the COVID stuff and who's playing, who's not. 10 straight SEC games. So I think there's a lot of variables, and then like we've been talking about, I mean, I think we all like Lane Kiffin to see how quickly he can get Ole Miss off the ground. And then obviously I think a lot of us like Mike Leach, see how quickly he can have an impact on Mississippi State.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Coach Steve? You're still muted, Coach. Hold on. There you go.
Me and technology. It's all right. I could see them going 4-6 or 7-3, somewhere in there. I know 4-6 doesn't sound very good, but look at the schedule. You just don't know. They'll be like the Arkansas and stuff. They will probably be Tennessee and everything, but then just too many question marks. But I just don't see them beating Georgia or the Alabamas. Even Kentucky, they have a great shot to beat them. And then again, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, that's your 2 big question marks that's going to determine if they're 7-3 or 4-6. I think those are the ones where if they're on fire on offense and stuff, they'll win. If they're having problems on the inside where Gus is stepping back in and saying we got to do this or that, those 2 games will be their demise to go under 500.
Okay. Coach Bennett.
I looked just a minute ago, and the over/under win total for them in Vegas was 8.5. So I mean, people in Vegas seem to think they know something that everybody else doesn't. But I mean, yeah, exactly. Coach Wilson just put in the chat how that was that was the first one I saw. So it could have been before the schedule, but if it's still 8.5, it's definitely. I think that's way too high, because I could see them, and I think 7-3 is as likely as 4-6, but I think 4-6, 5-5, he's fired. I think 7-3, you beat Georgia or beat Alabama, and he's liable to get another 7-year extension. I mean, there's no telling. I think 7-3 is probably the best they could hope for, and that's even if you say they're going to beat Georgia or they catch Bama again, because you still got LSU, you still got Mississippi State. I don't think Ole Miss is going to be. I don't think Ole Miss is going to be as ready to roll as Mississippi State is, just because I think Coach Leach's offense is a little bit simpler. And he got a lot of his guys to come with him from Washington State, whereas Coach Kiffin had to make some hires. But I think they're ceiling 7-3 and the floor's 4-6.
Okay. Coach Whitlock.
Yeah, I had the ceiling at 8-2. I mean, I to be honest, I didn't go through all the other teams to see what they lost and kind of what's coming back to really compare and look at each game individually. It was more of the gut check. What have they done recently? What have I seen from them last year? But I don't follow all those teams close enough to know what they actually lost. And then I had the floor being 5-5. I mean, that could happen. I don't think they'll be there with those two guys on offense, but the losses on defense are a little concerning. So I think they'll be somewhere in the middle, to be honest. But that's kind of what I had as floor and ceiling.
So I kind of went through the schedule, and I was like, okay, what do I think how they're going to win or lose this game? So I think they win versus Kentucky. I think they lose at Georgia. That's a tough one. That one could go either way. Like you said, Georgia might have something to prove, like they did a couple years ago, and just come in and whip them. I don't know. They could. I think it's a tough one. I don't think Auburn comes out with a W on that one. So a loss to Georgia. I think they beat Arkansas. That's probably their only one that's probably a guarantee win. Now, South Carolina. I think they trip up versus South Carolina at South Carolina. I don't know why, but South Carolina is always tough. Coach Bennett says they'll beat South Carolina by 28. They could. I'm just kind of predicting that's going to be their trip-up game, because I think they're going to have at least one trip-up game this year. They seem to always have one. And I think South Carolina's that one. I think they win at Ole Miss. LSU, again, I think that's a tough one because, they got Coach Orgeron. They always have good recruiting classes, but just look at how many of their guys they lost to the NFL this year. I mean, they lost a bunch of coaches to the NFL this year too. So I don't think LSU is going to be the same. I think Auburn beats LSU personally at home. Mississippi State, I know it's the air raid, but still, I think it takes a year or two for them to get ready. I think they beat Mississippi State. I think they beat Tennessee. I know some of you guys kind of said that Tennessee might be one of those that people are overlooking, but I'm going to be honest, Tennessee sucked the last couple of years. I don't know what's going on with Tennessee. That's one we really need to go over. We need to go over some teams that suck. Not always talk about teams that are really good. So Bama, Nick Saban's going to get him again this year. I mean, he doesn't lose twice. And then Texas A&M, that was another one I thought was a toss-up. But I think they beat Texas A&M. So I think their ceiling's about 7-3. I mean, they could go 8-2. They could go 9-1. It depends on how good they are, how much continuity they have on offense, defense. Hopefully, that defensive coordinator gets it done. My floor, based on the schedule, because it's the SEC, I think they could go like 4-6. I mean, really, there's a couple of games where it's going to be close and they could lose it if they don't have the right talent, if they don't have the continuity going on. So let's go ahead and move on to any final thoughts. And I'm going to give the floor to Coach Bandstra on any final thoughts first.
Before, I mean, I'm so glad people can't see our chat as we talk. Like this is this so yeah. I don't know their history as well as some of the other coaches, but I think they are who they are. They're a 8 to 10 win program based off my understanding of them, and they are who they are. I mean, they will perform slightly better under Gus Malzahn than they have in the past. It's not like, I mean, he's not Nick Saban, which there's nobody else that is. I mean, it's like you look at the coaching hierarchy, it's like Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, and then there's a small window for historical reverence. But he's done a good job of what he's built there, both as a coordinator and a head coach there. I mean, they are always competitive. I mean, yeah, we're a little unsure on the record. They could go 5-5 or they could go 8-2, but he's always got something up his sleeve. I mean, if this Chad Morris hire works out, I mean, Chad Morris might be finding a new head coaching job in like the Con USA really quickly. But I mean, if it works, I mean, he'll have a good year and he'll get another nice long extension. And I mean, kind of as coaches have pointed out earlier, like it's still just going to be hard. There's a little brother in that state. Alabama's right down the road. And then when you get to play Alabama and Georgia, I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, like I said, they're probably going to be a 7-3, 8-2 football team this year. And hopefully they can continue to develop that freshman quarterback they had last year, because if he develops, I mean, a year or two, I mean, they could be pretty dang good.
All right, Coach Bennett.
I got tied up in the chat. What was the question? I heard Coach Bandstra going.
Any final thoughts?
Auburn?
Yeah.
I think Chad Morris is a great hire. If they go 7-3, Chad Morris will stay, because I think the head coaching thing, it's going to take a couple of years, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Somebody might hire him tomorrow, but I think it'll take a couple of years to get that Arkansas off of him. So I mean, as a Clemson fan, Chad Morris was something to prove. They could come up and light it up. I've seen his offense do it. But very interesting. Very interesting. We'll see. We'll know after game one how much influence Coach Malzahn still got on the offense. Might know after the first series.
Yeah, if they run inside zone, it ain't Coach Malzahn. Coach Whitlock?
Yeah, I don't know. I think just, going through the schedule is kind of interesting. I think it'd be fun if we all just picked an SEC team and had to come in here and say why our team is going to beat the rest of your teams, that kind of thing. Because, as you were – I think it was you who was going through the schedule in your piece there, and you were talking about each team, and I'm thinking, okay, did Kentucky lose the little quarterback that they had? Did Georgia's got a new quarterback coming in, right? They're going to have two new guys, right, who are going to be fighting for the job, right? The guy from Wake Forest, and then the other one's a freshman, right? I think, or
transfer from USC.
Yeah, USC. That's right. Yeah. So, and that guy was super hyped, right? So, all that. You just go through the schedule and you start saying, okay, what did they lose? What's coming back? So yeah, it makes it even more interesting to think about where Auburn could finish and, kind of how they match up against some of these other teams and what's coming in, and, really dig down and say, okay, well, what is the quality of replacement? You know, is it they're going to replace with a freshman, or is it going to be, you know, another stud that's been waiting or has been in the rotation? So I think, you know, overall, I think, you know, I just can't wait to see how it unfolds, and hopefully we get to play and watch it, you know. So that's really all I have.
All right, Coach Steve.
I think it's amazing that he gets put on the hot seat when some of the records any team would die for. So that just kind of shows how competitive the SEC really is. And like, I think why he keeps his job is because every other year or so they beat Alabama. And I think that's why he keeps his job. But I think if that continues another year or two, if they lose to Alabama and he doesn't beat the other big teams, he could lose his job. But, you know, they're always a tough team. You look at their record, but if you look at the film, they don't really get blown out. They compete. So I don't think it's a bad program by any means. It's just with the schedule, it's really tough to win. So like everyone else said, hopefully we play and we can see how it unfolds, because this is a brutal schedule for them, but it's must-watch TV every Saturday when they play these teams. And hopefully Nick Saban gets them back this year.
Yeah. Final thoughts for me is, like I said earlier, if there was one thing that this team was missing, it might be that, you know, championship culture piece. Again, I don't know, because I've never actually been to a practice or anything like that, so I'm not exactly sure, but it's just from looking from the outside in, the culture might not exactly be there. I mean, you look at Auburn defense. Last year they played, I think Auburn was the only team LSU really had trouble scoring on last year. And that's a testament to their talent that they've had, but it's going to be, I'd be hard placed to put, you know how we talk about Clemson and Alabama defense all the time and how good they are year in and year out. You know, you really don't see that with Auburn, even though you see every year Auburn's got one or two really good defensive players that gets drafted pretty high in the NFL. So there's got to be something missing there. I'm not saying that defensive coordinator is a bad coach. I mean, he's coaching at a D1 SEC school, so he's got to be pretty good, right? So, you know, final thoughts. I love Auburn. I'm going to watch them whenever they're on TV. All right, that's my final thought. I'm going to be looking on Twitter for whenever somebody posts a new play or whenever somebody's asking for the all-22. You know, I'll be all over that. So, all right. That's going to be the end for tonight's podcast. Look forward to the next podcast. The next episode, we are going to talk Oklahoma Sooners. And after that, I believe we are also going to be talking Alabama and Ohio State. So look out for those as well. Thank you for listening in to the Armchair Coaching Podcast. Thank you, guys.